Very very boring. I don't know why we bothered. We just come
Why do
straight.
we even bother with the pre-show? It's because it's our only time to talk candidly.
Yeah.
Completely. You had some strong words about something.
Things.
And I did too.
Yeah.
And we were able to say those things before we went live. Hi, everybody.
Yes.
I hope your Thursday is going well.
My Thursday is going swelteringly. I mean, literally, because we're in the middle of a heat wave, which is kind of rare for September for us. But we'd been promised a sort of an Indian summer, a second summer, and I think what they're doing is basically ramming it all into about 4 days. So I'm hoping that it'll last over the weekend, because it's been a full-on week where I've spent a lot of time inside. But hopefully, we'll have a nice weekend out of it, because I could really do with a bit of a chill. So we shall see.
Gotcha.
What's your weekend look like? Have you got
I've got, well, I guess the biggest thing is that I am likely going to be laying down for most of it. This is my one more thing, but I'm going to share it in the pre-show because
I was going to say that we don't have the explicit rating again. Are we? What's up? Laying down?
No. Oh, I see where your mind was going. No. So, all right. This story is embarrassing. And I've told this story a couple times already, and I've been really struggling with how to tell this in a way that is less embarrassing. But I feel like there's just no way, so maybe you can help me brainstorm it. So the context here. For the laying down piece, I double sprain my knees. I sprained both of my knees simultaneously last Saturday. Okay, hold on. The how is the embarrassing part. All right, so I'm no stranger to good form, all right, with like working out. So if I was squatting in the context of working out, I don't think this would have been an issue. I think it was the context of the squat.
Right. Again, I will just point out the explicit rating on that we don't really want to get. So
okay, well, no, your mind is going to like places that it shouldn't, because I think the context of the squat here is what threw me off a little bit. So my son still needs some subtle encouragement to go potty.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I was squatting down, subtly encouraging him to go potty. And I don't know what happened. As I came up out of the squat, I heard both my knees pop. And I immediately became lightheaded. Reached for the nearest thing I could find, which was a stack of toilet paper boxes. Put my hand on it, and they were arranged in just a way that like it wouldn't offer me support. So I put my hand on it, fell down, and I don't know what happened after that, but I woke up I woke up on the floor, face up towards the ceiling, next to my son's potty, like inches from pee, and with my wife hovering over me, asking me what happened.
Sorry, I'm not laughing.
No. And I mean, it's hilarious now. It was really scary in the moment. And so I don't exactly know what happened. I can walk on them now. They hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I was in double knee braces earlier this week. And I'm still having some difficulty like getting up and some mobility issues and some pain issues, but like healing.
The whole pop and passing out bit, that's the bit that I think would, I don't know, mildly concern me.
That's the part that mildly concerns me too.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, I was going to say, have you been to the doctors or anything with this? But that, I guess it's a slightly more difficult conversation.
In the US, yeah.
In the US, you can't. It's not as easy. Just well, I mean, said that in the UK,
I could have gone to urgent care, but look, here's the thing: is I wasn't like if I was completely unable to walk, if my knees were like buckling, I was able to walk after it, albeit in pain, and which led me to believe that it was not a serious injury. I'm still monitoring the situation, and if things don't progress,
So I will take you back to a human factors lecture you must have had around point of pain evolution, and that's just that general stuff, and which can be summed up as the pain is trying to tell you something, and walking around in severe amounts of pain after just crouching and your knees going pop. It's possibly a message that you might want to take a bit more strongly and consider it in a way that I wouldn't if I'd do exactly what you're doing and thinking that it'll get better. But at least I feel better now having said that to you in a lecturing sort of manner.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you. I appreciate the lecture. I believe me, I have my threshold. Like, here's the thing: is I have predefined thresholds for like how long must pain persist before I talk to a medical professional.
Mine's only about 4 months.
And it's like this matrix of severity and time, okay? In my head, this is how I see it. It's a severity time matrix where I'm like, oh, if it's a pain scale of like 10 and it persists for longer than a day, go. If it's like a pain scale of 5 and it persists more than a month, then go. And I'm somewhere at like, a 7 with what happened, and so I'm looking at like maybe half a month. So if it so like 2 weeks. So I'm looking at like, if it doesn't get better by the end of next week, I'll go in.
And you'll go. Fair enough.
Yeah. That's kind of how I do it. Although it was like a 7 when it initially happened, and it's slowly worked its way down to like a 5, or I'm probably at a 5, but it's still like the initial onset of the 7 is where. Yeah.
Yes. That's where when I did I had the trapped nerve in my shoulder that my wife sort of recognized that I was in real pain. When I was like, no, I think I need to go and see the doctor now. I think I need to go and talk to somebody because this no. So yes.
Well, I often attribute like me still being here to my wife because my appendectomy it's like curdled over on the side in the bathtub going, oh, it's like, go to the doctor. I'm like, no, I'm fine. I just need a suppository.
Yeah, that's what.
So, yeah.
See,
happy Thursday, everyone. There you go. There's the story to start us off.
Partners are amazing when they choose.
Yes.
When they choose to be.
Yes.
So we've got a cool story tonight.
It feels, Barry, like we've done this story before.
Well, that's kind of, if we're not careful, we have. Because if we go down the let's have another go at having a go at Elon Musk again, because let's face it, that's always fun at the moment.
Are we just bashing on him every week now? Is that what's happening?
Well, if he didn't have his finger in so many pies, or in this case, in your brain, then we wouldn't. But I think that's where we've got to try and steer clear of that. I mean, acknowledge that the fact that he's driving the leading technologies in this at the moment, but fundamentally, that's really we're talking around. Once his technology is there, what do we need to do about it in terms of human rights? In terms of what are your rights? Because actually, the more I got thinking about this, I think the scarier it becomes, which we'll talk about in the show. But it's when we sort of think about human rights and stuff, we think about the really formal stuff. But then I was like, well, if you this whole idea of mental privacy, the amount of stuff that goes on in my head that I don't want me to know about, never mind anybody else. Things that when you get like the random thoughts that just float across your mind, like, I've got no idea where that came from. or you're
Yeah.
thinking 3 or 4 different things at once, or just when you get distracted and stuff like that. Who wants to understand and know that? I've kind of got, I guess, an image of having a, almost a TV screen on in the background, where somebody's put the Matrix type spike into the back of your head, and it starts playing all the stuff that goes on in your mind. That's just, there's a lot of stuff there that people just don't want to see, and I think we'd look at people in very different ways.
So you just reminded me of a TikTok I saw earlier this week. Those random thoughts that come into your head. This family at like, cliffs by an ocean. There's a child there, and the child says, "Oh, look how close that lady is to the edge. She could just one push and she could go whee." And the mom comes in and says, "Those are intrusive thoughts, and we don't say them out loud."
Oh,
it had me in stitches.
It's no, but you're right. I mean, there is so many random things you think that you just like going, yeah. Oh,
sorry. I'm gonna. Oh my god! All right. Oh jeez.
But you're right, though. We've done this before in terms of certain elements in more than one episode in one way or another, but definitely one.
So I will say this episode will get very close to episode 279, where we talked about BCIs as a device posing a threat to our mental privacy. And this article is more along the lines of the rights that we have with that. So I feel like we can kind of continue that discussion, because a lot of the things that we talked about in that previous discussion were on things about kind of the larger trend of like Meta, Microsoft, Apple, all developing these BCIs and potentially designing these things for friendly user experiences, but also the mental health impacts, and then also the misuse of these BCIs and data around them, and potentially kind of what they could be used for in terms of their application. And so like this will be more on the like privacy side of things, where we're looking at what should be included in a like Bill of Rights, so to speak, about mental privacy, or I guess mental rights, neurorights, as they're calling it in this article. So it's going to be a good companion piece, I'll say, to the other one. And I think we have enough differentiating factors here for this episode that we can go off of.
Yeah, it's interesting because actually I sort of assumed that we wouldn't talk about the technology at all, but actually there is going to be a bit of the technology to a certain extent, because I guess there is going to be the, do you have the right to hook up and unhook? I guess it's sort of technology agnostic. It's about the interface, but it's if you want.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a tech piece here for sure.
So I'm going to change what my.
Okay, you go ahead and change that.
Yeah, just because I think we should be looking at. Actually, there's a whole bunch of other notes as well we should be doing. But I might just scroll down and look at that. Not fun today either. I had, as I said last week, we moved into new offices, and so I was putting my desktop back together. So my laptop and the hookup and the because I've got more of a gaming keyboard, because I find the gaming keyboards work better, and a mouse because I like the pretty light. But then my typing, my spelling, and everything was just way worse than usual. And I'm like, I know my spelling isn't brilliant, and I type pretty quickly, but I'm not a proper touch typist and things like that. And so I do spend time correcting errors. But it was way worse than usual, like really way worse. And I couldn't work out what was going on. it wasn't until I slowed everything right down and I started looking at what was going on the screen as opposed to what I was typing. Basically, the keyboard wasn't working properly since the move. The keyboard just wasn't working properly, and so I swapped it out for a standard keyboard, and now my spelling and writing has just moved up to being rubbish, my usual level of rubbish, as opposed to completely incompetent. So I think I might be in line for a new keyboard.
You should get one of those chording keyboards. Have you seen those?
No.
The chord keyboards that stenographers use? You must have seen them.
I might have, but I don't recognize.
They're fascinating. They're fascinating devices, and they allow you to type. I think it's called a chord keyboard for stenography. What's it called?
Oh,
corded keyboard. So basically, the way it works is instead of hitting keys serially, you hit keys in parallel. And these combinations of keys allow you to type really quickly.
Oh, okay.
And so you can hit many that's how you can see like this live closed captioning that's happening by a stenographer in like a courtroom.
Yes, yeah.
Or something like that, is because they have a corded keyboard where these different combinations of buttons allow you to type very quickly. And so it's like, mashing combos on a controller, except you're doing it with a keyboard to write words at a time. And stenotype. Is that what it's called? Yeah. Here, I'll courtesy of Wikipedia. This. Let's just share that one. This is what a stenotype looks like.
Okay.
And you can see there's no letters or anything on it, and you just learn the chord combinations.
Cool.
But you might be able to, make like one word with one hand and then the next word with the other hand and just keep going back and forth. And it's like, apparently you can make them, you can write really fast. WPM with a stenotype first keyboard. Let's see. So you can write, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, in one stroke on a stenotype.
Wow.
Which is just amazing versus hitting all those keys individually, right?
But presumably that is more around taking phrases that they would use on a regular basis and basically setting up shortcut keys.
No.
Oh, okay. But in that case, I'm completely wrong.
No, the way stenotype, it's not a to be clear, it's not a keyboard that works like it's not a keyboard that works like a macro generator. It's essentially, here I'm gonna read this. So on a chorded keyboard, you hit multiple keys at once instead of one at a time. A chord is only registered when you release all the keys. The order that you press them down doesn't matter. Only which keys you hit is important. So there's a lower number of keys. So what I showed you on that was a double one. So you could actually do one hand on each of them to do two words at once.
Wow.
One of those is a chorded keyboard. and it has kind of the vowels at the bottom. Those here, I can actually just share this too. It's fascinating because I feel like this could be really a good way to teach typing, and I might do this for my son at some point. Although he's already familiar with a QWERTY keyboard at the age of 3, so there's that. But this is a QWERTY keyboard, and it doesn't have an I key, it doesn't have an N key, it doesn't have a shift, and no punctuation. It has 2 S's.
Oh yeah.
2 T's, 2 P's, and 2 R's. And everything that's missing from the base layout is made up from combinations of other keys. Not really that, but the names of the keys that don't represent letters, they represent sounds. You hit the U key, the result is not the letter U. It is the full word you. So in that sense, it works like a macro, but when corded with things, it
then brings it in. Oh.
Right.
It's interesting that I think because what a lot of people, I don't know whether this is just rumor or whatever, but the reason we've got the layout of keyboard we've got at the moment is actually to slow typists down rather than be more efficient. From when we had proper typewriters, and to stop the clashes of the mechanical printing elements coming together.
Right.
So if this is because of, I guess now with digital, then we can afford to speed things up. So interesting.
Yeah. So you hover your fingers in the middle there, go up, go down, and like I want to see. Oh, and you can hit all those keys at once. So like I want to see an example. The vowel key in the middle. It's so fascinating to me. Yeah. And anyway,
I'm now just looking up to see whether I say whether what I said is true or it's just urban myth. I think it might just be urban myth. So the QWERTY did place common alphabet letters at a distance from each other,
right,
to stop them.
Okay, that's what I thought. I didn't want to say anything, but I thought they had organized the keyboard in a way that made the most common letters easier to access, right, and moved things like Z out of the way, so that way you're not reaching for that as much. Z, Q.
So it's sort of half right in that it was made to make the act of mechanical typing more efficient. But it is still less efficient. It's still less efficient than modern day keyboards, such as the Dvorak and the Colemak layouts, which I don't know what they are. I guess I now need to know what that looks like to understand the difference.
Next week on the show,
yes,
corded keyboards.
I see. Okay, so the Dvorak keyboard layout looks odd, but puts the most common keys right on that center row. Not vastly different, but it is enough. And the Colemak it's got right. Yeah, it's a similar principle, but it's or similar intent. It's just a change around to be more efficient, even more efficient, and not worry about the mechanical. Interesting. So I didn't think we'd end up going down that route.
No, I didn't think so either. Before we start, I wanted to just mention one other thing.
Mm-hmm. Go for it.
And it's not one more thing. It's it came from today.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, I am just come on. some weeks I don't even think we should do it, honestly. And I've been thinking about that. But this week, the questions are phenomenal.
They're certainly questions that I think we can actually provide some decent input to, instead of just saying, get another job. Or what's the other one? Your portfolio, just make it up with whatever you've got. All them sort of things. You can tell I've had so I'm in this cabin at the bottom of my garden. You can tell that I've had it open all day to try and get the heat out of it. Is because there's so many bugs in here. It's unreal. You on the top of my telly. There we go. So if you see me randomly just trying to bat things and hit things like that, it's because it's turned into
amazing.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think the 3 questions are good. They're valid, and
definitely a vein in a different vein from our normal.
Indeed, yes.
Samey questions. I think they're good. I think they're good little nuggets of info.
Yes, I completely agree. We've got 3 minutes. Is there anything else we need to be doing before we go live? I think we're good. I'm hoping I can come up fair and actually get some new interviews done on 1202, because I've had the same interview up now for quite a while. I don't actually, it's a couple of weeks, but yeah, I'm behind on that. I'm hoping by the end of September that life becomes slightly easier, though I don't think it will. But I think it's still going to be full on. But I've got new team members joining in October, so life might become somewhat easier then.
For some reason, something didn't happen here in the right way. Oops. Don't know why that is. Okay. Wow, really? You're one more thing. Okay. Yes, I mean... Okay. All right. Yeah, I get you. I feel that a lot. But, like, also... No?
Yeah, no, it's completely... I mean, I'll say it's completely down to me. And prioritization being... if I might change it, because I might be a bit more honest about something that was reflected about me and the way I lead, and which was equally a slap in the face and a interesting, useful realization point.
Oh, okay. I'm interested in this. I love me some self-reflection.
Yeah, I think I might. Yeah, I might go down that route. In fact, they're both linked. So.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Oh, and it is still very warm in here.
Sweltering.
It is. So again, as well as wafting around trying to hit bugs, you're probably going to see me sat just melting in a thing. So the breaks that we have is going to be me dashing outside, sticking my head underwater, and all that sort of stuff.
Awesome. If you don't come back from this intro with a drenched scalp, I'm going to be disappointed. I'll be right back.
Welcome to Human Factors Cast, your weekly podcast for human factors, psychology, and design.
Hi, everybody. Hi. It's September 7th, 2023. This is Human Factors Cast, episode 293. I'm your host, Nick Roome, and I'm joined today by Mr. Barry Kirby.
Hello.
Hi, Barry. Your head's not wet.
Oh, it is. You just can't see him very well. I'm
Okay. All right.
sitting down here. Oh, not nice.
For context, go watch the pre-show. We got an amazing show for you all lined up tonight. We're going to be diving into the fascinating world of neurotechnology once again, and how it's blurring the lines around mental privacy and what it means for our neuro rights. And later on, we'll be answering some questions from our community about traveling jobs for human factors professionals, creating research questions, and when to delete usability test recordings. Nice, refreshing change from some of the normal questions we get. But before we jump into all that, let's kick things off with some programming notes. Hey, we're not going to do a show next week. 8/14, or 9/14 is no longer August. It is September. No show September 14th. Changing that in the show notes. And if you do have the means to, we would love for you to go leave us a review and tell your friends about the show. And if you have the money and you want to do that too, we have a Patreon. You'll find all about that at the link. But Barry, I have to know what's going on over at 1202.
So at 1202, the latest interview is an interview with Dr. Mark Young. And he's one of these people who spent a fair bit of time in academia and in industry, and he's just flipped back again to go back into academia. So we talk about that balance between academia and industry and what it means, what both sides could learn from each other in terms of what our priorities are and what our drivers are. Also, Mark is the upcoming president, so he's the current president-elect of the CIHF, so we talk a bit about what his ambitions are for the Institute. So, well worth go and listen.
Perfect. Well, let's not bury the lead. Let's get into the into the article of the show and the thing with. I love it when I cut myself off because I'm just stumbling over the words. This is the part of the show all about human factors news. Barry, what is the story this week?
As long as you promise not to cut me off before I finish. The story this week is about new...
Okay, I promise not to cut you off. Oh, sorry.
I asked for that, didn't I? Totally. The story this week is about new neurotechnology. Is blurring the lines around mental privacy, but are new human rights the answer? So in the article, the author discusses the advancements of neurotechnology and the ethical and privacy concerns that come along with it. They highlight the growing number of companies developing brain-computer interfaces, BCIs as we've referred to them in the past, and the potential benefits for patients with paralysis or neurological disorders. However, it also raises the important questions around mental privacy and autonomy. They argue that while neurotechnologies can record brain activity with great specificity, interpreting and reading the activity is complex and not straightforward. They compare the privacy risks of neurotechnology to those of more familiar data collection technologies like online surveillance and wearable devices. The article also delves into the concept of cognitive liberty, which is the right of individuals to think independently and autonomously. Proponents of cognitive liberty argue that greater regulation of neurotechnology is needed to protect individuals' freedom to control their own thoughts. However, the author suggests that the way cognitive freedom is discussed neglects the relational aspects of who we are and how we think. They emphasize that the importance of acknowledging the many influences and forces that shape our thoughts and advocate for a holistic approach to protecting privacy and freedom in an era of advancing neurotechnologies. This article raises important questions around the social and ethical implications of neurotechnology and calls for thoughtful consideration and regulation in order to protect individual rights. So, Nick, what are your thoughts on... Oh, wait, hold on. Can I not just plug a USB into you and read your thoughts directly and it'd be there for all to see?
Wouldn't that be scary?
Oh, yeah.
So this topic might sound a little familiar to listeners of the show. There's going to be some overlap with another episode that we did back, I think, in March of this year. I was talking about neuro privacy. It was episode 279. So we're going to try to focus on the neuro rights rather than the technology piece. Like I said, there will be some blurring and some overlap here, but it'll be kind of a continuation of that discussion. So my first thoughts is, yes, we should have human rights to our thoughts and our privacy and our brain, because no way am I letting Elon Musk inside my head. I don't know how you feel, but if we're going to continue the theme of last week of hitting Elon Musk over the head of bad decisions, no way am I letting him in my brain. I get worried about the aggregation of data from things like my browser history or my search queries. Like, how can you give me a targeted ad when I didn't even search for that thing, and I may have said it, and my thoughts somehow have connected. When I say thoughts, my search patterns, my browsing history on social media or whatever has somehow indicated to these algorithms that I need an ad for deodorant or something. I don't know, right? How does it do that? Well, it aggregates all the data, but how does it transform that data? We don't know. There's If you can do that with brain and thoughts, that's a lot more scary. And especially when you start to get to like neurodivergence, where you might have more errant thoughts than maybe someone who's neurotypical. So, like, I was bringing it up in the pre-show, but like invasive, intrusive thoughts. Like, what if you have those? Like, are you going to get an ad for something? I don't know. But I mean, to me, I think this just calls for like an incognito mode for your mind. Can you turn it on and off? You brought up that question also in the pre-show. I don't know. I'm kind of cart before the horse here, Barry. What are your initial thoughts on this?
My initial thoughts are quite long. I think to sort of reinforce the point that you made, let's not worry about specific technologies. Let's give Elon a break. Assume fundamentally that for the sake of this discussion that this is a thing that we can do, or we're close to it. But as we get close to it, it is absolutely right that it is something that we should be talking about. We have learned through the examples you just highlighted around the evolution of the way that people can use and abuse data and also really interrogate it in a really deep way that we didn't know about before. So the way we talk about this, a lot of this is evolutionary, but in the similar way that we talked about the space stuff that the FEA were doing, because we now know, we've learned that we need to be doing some of this early, then we should really use the example of this as well. And yes, let's talk about and let's put some rights in place. Again, having that piece around it that we don't restrict what we can do, because I think there is some amazing things we can do with this. We talk about neurodiversity. I think this will lead us to understand better what neurodiversity is all about. And actually, I think we'll find out that the idea of being neurotypical is probably quite a rare thing. That we understand more about the wonderful thing that we currently abstractly just call a spectrum, which I think is it's way too simplistic, and this will help us learn more. We don't want to restrict that type of understanding, but equally we are a long way, I think, from the movies would have us believe that, or our simplistic way of understanding this is somebody puts a spike a la the Matrix inside your head, and we will just get a verbatim stream or a movie of what your thoughts are. And we don't think, I certainly don't think that. I mean, I don't think like that. That's, and I don't know. We don't really know how anybody else thinks. It's our extrapolation of doing that type of thing. So what that looks like, how we interpret that, is still miles and miles away. So it does frame the question around Neurorights and what are they actually consisting of. So we quite rightly said we have freedom of speech. What about the freedom of thought? If you're having nice, pleasant thoughts, fluffy clouds and nice beer, that type of thing, they're all fine thoughts. But what about thoughts that might be close to the edge, that you might be having violent thoughts, you might be having thoughts about other people that are fine in your own head, or you might have an opinion that you never voice, but you might still think, but you have personal self-control that you don't do anything about that. Is it right that actually we could actually censor the way that you think? So the obvious film correlation here is 1984, where you have like thought speak and thought crimes, and things like that. We need to make sure that our democracy relies on the need for people to be able to think and have that freedom of speech. But I think also this is more than just simple, and I use that word, in do the whole inverted commas thing. simple civil liberties, because it's not just about being able to communicate with other people. What does it mean for like communicating at home with loved ones? Will there be a demand almost to be able to hook up on that mental level, and there be that level of expectation to do that? And what could that mean for relationships? What could that mean for building up relationships and the relationships that are breaking down? What right do we have to have a secret, to have our own personal thoughts, our own personal opinions about things that we never pass on to anybody else? So that's a whole one package that I would like to explore. The second bit is, how do these thoughts get stored? So having not talking about specific technologies, but around, if we are thinking these things, they get uploaded somewhere to the cloud, whatever that cloud looks like. Who owns the cloud? What rights do they have with that cloud? You mentioned the whole sort of Google Ads type of thing. What would Google do with that, or any other company who gets their hands on it? And then if somebody else can get hold of your experiences, what happens if they use your experiences for their own gain? So if you've done something and then they use the way that you've done something because they've basically shared your experience, that they've hacked into it or whatever it is, and they use your experiences for their own benefit without asking your permission or you knowing about it, is that theft? Is that something around that? I don't know quite where that goes. I know there's been loads of work done on it on various aspects about doing this in a positive aspect, about being able to share information, share that type of thing. But what about on the nefarious side? So I think I've rambled on quite a lot about a whole bunch of different things. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, that's a good question. You mentioned too, I'm thinking of this multidimensionally as well. I'm thinking almost like, so to get at your point about like your own thoughts, I feel like there's sort of this right to autonomy. We should be able to think freely without any influence from outside sources, or interference from outside sources, right? And I think that is kind of should be the foundation. We have the right to think freely. I think there's also some of the things that you brought up around data ownership and where's that data stored. I think that there, there should be some, if you're thinking about like almost like a bill of rights for our thoughts, I feel like, or mental privacy, however, Neurorights, as this article puts it, I think we must think about sort of who owns that data. And it should absolutely be the person with those thoughts because they are the originator of those thoughts. Is there a shared ownership? I don't think there should be. Is there licensing? I don't think there should be. But like, again, how do you use that for some of the technology? I don't know. I just think that you should have the ownership to those thoughts wherever it's stored on a data center because you are the originator, and there shouldn't be any gotchas in like the EULA end user license agreement. I think there's also an element of consent with collecting thoughts. You should have a right to consent, for lack of a better term, what data can and can't be collected. I mentioned incognito mode earlier. To me, that's like, I don't want you collecting anything right now.
Mm-hmm.
I am in a space where I am brainstorming ideas for, I don't know, offshoot podcasts, and I don't want anybody stealing those ideas because they're stored in a database and you don't have good privacy or, whatever it is. Right to turn it on and off, right to consent when those technologies come in. I think there's also, along the same lines of like the data center, I think there's gotta be rights for being able to erase that data. And protecting people from having their data stored against their will. So, when that happens, there's also the transparency elements about data centers and all that stuff too. So I think there's a lot of different things that I'm thinking about from that perspective as well. And it almost be kind of fun to think up a Bill of Rights. Like, I don't think that we're fully capable of doing that right now on this podcast on the fly. It's not like we prepared that extensively for the show. I mean, not to the extent that we would go through and look at Bill of Rights and everything, but I mean, you think about some of these things in connection to older technologies, right? So like the autonomy, you can think about how some of these algorithms on social media are influencing our thinking and decision making. And you can, like I said, with those advertisements, like those are coming from somewhere, and it's the connection of browsing history from like another data perspective. I can see it being like, yeah, we need to avoid that. And I think that should be absolutely true for social media too. You should have that sort of autonomy. I think when you compare this to other like rights that are codified in various governments across the world, and not so much in others, but like this is very similar to like freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm.
You have the right to express your thoughts without interference, not without consequence. That's another interesting piece, though.
Well, I was going to say, because the freedom of speech is, and I'm going to use the wrong terminology, but the freedom of speech isn't an absolute right. It is it's a conditional right on, and we're seeing that, I think, more and more at the moment around, social approval. So the way we talk about race, so we've got the protected characteristics, for example. So when we talk about, the absolute right to freedom of speech, actually, we don't necessarily have that in that same way. So is there, in the same way that we have protected characteristics in terms of freedom of speech and things like that, how do protected characteristics work in Neuro thoughts? Because
exactly,
wow, head blown. Right, so let's go a bit simpler than that, because I think we need to come back to that one. And do that.
Okay, let's come back to that one. Where do you want to go? Where else do you want to go?
A couple of simple scenarios. When you get arrested, you have you can take the fifth. In America, in the UK, we have the right not to say anything, unless it harms your defense. Blah 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 blah. Thankfully, I've never had it read to me, so I can't. I don't know the Miranda off by heart. But the police have a right to question you when you've been arrested and all that sort of stuff. And then they can take whatever you say and use that as evidence. If you've got an ability to have a device, and say it's actually a fairly simple device, it's the equivalent of USB or whatever it is, but they can actually just hook you up. Should they have the right to do that? What do you think?
I thought you were going simpler. This is, to me, a more complex situation.
Well, actually, no. So I think the fundamental principle of the police, and let's split up police from justice for the moment.
Okay.
So just the police. You've been arrested, Nick. You've been arrested. You've done whatever you've been doing. The police and they want to know what you were doing at a particular time, etc., etc. Do they? And we have the technology. It's easy. Blah blah blah. They're a trusted entity because we elect and the police force. Should they be able to plug into you and be able to get where you were at a particular time and what you were doing and thinking, etc.?
Okay, this kind of goes back to my point about consent.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I think there is a right to consent. If you say I've done nothing wrong, you can plug in, and if they find something that's not, you did do something wrong, you've consented, and that is your choice.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this connects to other things, like end user license agreements. Okay.
Let me take that a little bit further, because there's two things that you've raised there, which I think is really interesting. Firstly, if I don't consent, does that imply guilt because I'm hiding something? Now I think
it
shouldn't, but if you give a no comment interview, for example, then that can be sort of characteristically used against you in the courtroom. I think your Miranda rights still say that actually, you don't have to say anything unless you don't have to say anything at all because you've got the Fifth Amendment. In the UK, it's our thing changed slightly differently. So you can no comment, but if you later want to rely on something in court that you haven't said previously, then that makes it more difficult. So they're trying to encourage discussion. So that's one thing. So you can no comment, do the equivalent of a no comment. No, you can't plug in.
Right.
What are the consequences of that? And I think that's almost captured already in that idea of I'm taking the fifth. What happens? They plug in. You've consented to this. That you said, right? You can plug in and prove that I wasn't jaywalking, or I wasn't speeding, or whatever it was, or I didn't murder that individual. They find that actually, yes, that's legit. That's proven your alibi. That's you didn't do it. But actually, they accidentally find something else. They maybe look a bit, because as we sort of said, is the technology going to be the sort that says, right, I only want to look at thoughts between 9:32 and 9:47. I can't see it being as simple as that. There's going to have to be some level of analysis, some level of interpretation, almost like a psychological interview type thing. And if the person doing the interpretation, that type of thing, finds, oh well, no, they didn't do that, but actually they've been doing tax fraud for the past 40 years. Is that admissible? So that's one thing, and I think it's interesting because I think that's you can go down to a whole web of things there. Twist it though. Let's make it a force for good. You've had knee complaints. You're going to go and see the doctor. Will you get to the doctor and they say, it's okay, just let me hook in, and then I'll be able to understand what you were doing, what you were thinking at the time, why you did such an activity, or even,
Right.
would this work if you're unconscious? That'd be cool, or not. Do you have to give positive consent to plug in? Because if you rock up to the ER unconscious and they have the ability to plug in and work out what you're doing for completely good, genuinely good reasons, but then they find stuff out. I mean, where do you have to consent before that happens, or can people just jack in to your brain just for fun? What do you think?
Yeah, I think. Well, you've brought up a lot of really interesting
I'm here.
questions. So there's like you could let's start with the medical, because that's where my head is at right now. Okay, so there are informed consent practices in medical, and I think that is a good analogy to take when it comes to plugging in at the doctor's office. Do you give consent? Yes. Patients must be informed prior to whatever procedure they're getting done, or in this case, a BCI, that what data is being accessed. And they got to give consent for that. And I think that is going to be fairly analogous to the rights that are present today. I feel like that's just going to be built on. When it comes to other things, like if you're unconscious, I feel like you must have other safeguards in place. Like in some cases, there's like people with DNRs, do not resuscitate, instructions, basically, that if they go offline, they're not going to reboot them. So I think something like that could potentially exist for this. If I'm unconscious, do not plug me in. Even if it could be life-saving, do not plug me in. And I think that is the right that falls under that right to consent too. Now, when it comes to law, I don't know all the answers, and I feel like
Before we jump into the law bit,
okay, go.
With the this informed consent with the doctors, what am I consenting to? And the reason I ask the question is, if I consent to a blood test, and they take the blood, but they still turn around and I'm consenting to a blood test for this test, this test, this test, this test. You can only use my blood to do, or you are using my blood to do these 4 tests. You can't then go off. They're not allowed to then go off and do a pregnancy test or another test that
Right.
you haven't approved to. You haven't approved the use of. If I'm saying yes, of course you can jack in. What am I?
Okay, be careful with your language here. We don't want to get.
That's true, but that's a good matrix phrase, so that's fine. If I'm hooking up, what am I allowing you to see, and how do I?
Much better.
That's true. how do I know whether my rights have been infringed or not? Because it's not like you can say, oh, well, actually, look, I've got evidence here. You took 5 tests instead of 4. You took 2 vials of blood instead of 1. All you've got is, at the moment, we assume that the thoughts are not getting sucked out of your head. They're being read. So, or they're, interpreted in some way. So you presumably don't know what has and has not been read, interpreted, whatever the terminology is.
Okay. All right. Let's cart horse this, because I think there's two things going on here. I think, one, we're talking about rights in the sense of, like, in a perfect world, this is what should happen. I think what some of the stipulation that you're throwing out there could be seen as this middle ground where technology could potentially overstep when we haven't necessarily figured out how to rip the correct thoughts out. And so I guess, what comes first, the rights or the devices? The devices are already out there, or they're starting to be developed, which is, I think, why we need sort of these rights, because the rights will drive the limitations of the devices. If we say that you cannot access these parts of the brain or whatever it is that is happening, then these companies will build the devices to do exactly that. Now, they might fail. They might need to get government approval to do some things. It might be red tape and caution tape everywhere to get those things done, but they'll happen in a way that will be in adherence with that Bill of Rights, the Neurorights. If it goes the other way, and it happens like AI, where there's this big boom and everyone's like, oh, look what we can do with this. We can, all these nefarious purposes. We can fake your grandma's voice and get your PIN number without any laws in place, right? And I'm sure that breaks some, but that's up for interpretation right now, because it's not codified in an AI Bill of Rights. But if we had done the AI Bill of Rights before all this technology, then, and we had specified who's liable in those situations, then there might be some limitations on the technology. So I think we're thinking about the cart before the horse. I'm just talking about from, like, a what should be perspective, and not like what happens if perspective.
Well, no.
If that makes sense.
So I think this is the way that a lot of good policy is, or these rights are, because it, rather than talking in the abstract, I think throwing real life, supposedly real life cases out in technology that we don't understand yet. And actually, somebody else is doing the same, some of this on social media. So Sean Sabatini on my LinkedIn raises a couple of interesting points that I think we should reflect on. So you've got a non-neurotypical person. How can you obtain consent of a non-verbal person about getting their thoughts accessed, scrapped, whatever? So that's going to have to be something that would be brought into this rights bill. How do we get that to happen? There's got to be other ways of doing it.
Can nonverbal people not write their signature on a piece of paper?
Possibly,
that outlines?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think again, I think it's again acknowledging, the different type of people that we have, and how do
there's more than one way to gather consent, and I'm
an interesting one here. So we talk in terms of reading brain patterns, reading your thoughts, and really talking about the activity within synaptic pathways. What about people who have non-typical synaptic pathways? The whole that they have more of them, like sort of people who are more multilingual, people who are musical, things like that, and there's elements around that. So I honestly don't know the answer to that, and that is probably an entire new episode in itself. Presumably, once the technology gets a bit better. I think that's interesting. But I think the bit that he goes on to say is, if we can understand and read all of that, we promise we won't get into the technology, but I think this is cool. How far from it would we be then into influencing people? So not necessarily giving them specific thoughts, via technology, but influencing what they're doing. It kind of goes back to what you said around, people being able to put the right sort of adverts in front of you. If we understand what their thoughts are, could we activate specific pathways in order to influence what they're thinking, in order to get them to do things like buy things or do certain actions? So, yeah, interesting. And then there's a whole cybersecurity element that he highlights that I think is a very good point. But,
Yeah.
wow, let's save that one for another time as well.
Good social thought.
Mm.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes back to that autonomy, being able to think on your own without influence or interference. And then the the consent piece, that's an easy solve for me. The only scenario in which I can visualize is somebody who's blind, deaf, and cannot read Braille and has no other way to communicate.
Mhm.
In that case, like, there might be some issues with consent, but I think in most cases, a piece of paper that says we are collecting this data, similar to what you sign when you go to the doctor for blood, we're conducting these tests, and with that, we'll be accessing, your memories for the last 6 weeks. We'll be accessing, I don't know how this data will be like. What the phrasing of this data, like your like what is a memory versus like your vitals for the last, is that stored somewhere in your brain? Can you access that? I don't know. Like, what do we have access to, and how do we categorize that? Whole other question, I think, outside of this.
It's sort of isn't, because you're right. We've majored here largely on conscious thought. What about subconscious thought? What about the other data that exists within your brain that isn't about your conscious conscious or subconscious thought? It is about, it's got the other stuff that is going on, and then you've got dreams as well. Well, because that yeah, I possibly don't want to go down that.
Mm. Well, and then you have different brain functions happening in different parts of your brain. And so you're like, what if you gave access to everything except for your prefrontal cortex?
Yeah.
You don't know what critical thinking is happening. You're getting sort of the raw input. Like, I'm just wondering where, or specific brain functions, right? You might just tap in only to my prefrontal cortex and tell me how I'm thinking about,
Yeah.
how get the input, and then give it input, recreate my prefrontal cortex and have it create an input based on, or have it create an output based on an input. Like,
So then it would, given a set of context, it mapping how you think, not what you think, and so therefore it could give you.
right.
I've done a project on that. Just saying,
Yeah.
it's quite cool.
Yeah. Cool stuff.
Not as blatant as the reading of the brain thing, but certainly the other side of it. And it's kind of it bought, well, in fact, it sparked a lot of conversations which we have done previously around, but it is again worth bringing up around what happens when you die. All these things are stored, they get reused, because I think you and Heidi did the actual episode on this sort of thing, because I think I was on a holiday and I was commenting in the background. But again, this is something that I think certainly I've spoken to David Burden about, who's a bit of an expert in this type of thing as well. So this then comes up to that again around your, not only your right to privacy, but your right to be deleted, but your right to die. And therefore, do you need to be able to put into your will, for example, to say, in the same way now that do you give somebody else access to your Facebook account? Is it still called Facebook this week? I think it is. I don't think that's trended off anywhere.
Meta.
You give somebody can have access to your Facebook account. That's fine, but do you want them to have other people to have access to your thoughts that have been beautifully stored in the cloud, not been abused in any way, but they're there, and therefore people can find out truly what you thought about them after you've died and there's no consequence for you? Or do you have the right to turn around and say, on my death, press that big red delete button? There's something else that should go into this neurotypical Neuro Bill of Rights.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think the right to opt out is sort of one that rings true with those statements, right? Any system, technology, platform that collects your data, you should be able to say no, thank you. There's, yeah, I think, yes, I have some closing thoughts that I want to get to, but I want to hear from you. What are your closing thoughts on this? Because I can't believe we've already talked for almost 40 minutes on this.
Wow, that went quick. I think my last thought is around, again, it's around government usage, and it's at the moment a lot of, so we've transitioned a lot in the past, I would say 10 to 15 years, to everything that you access for government is now online. That online is standard. So if you want to order, work out when your bins are being collected, all the way through to accessing critical services, online is the way you do it, and anything else is by exception rather than. So if you can't access the internet, there is a paper version that you can find somewhere in a very hard to do way. How long are we when brain BCIs become the norm? How far away are we from the government saying the way that you access this service is through a BCI? No other way we'll do it because it's the easiest way for us to implement it, and to know that you're a legitimate person doing their thing. They'll make the case for it. It might be 100 years away from now, but access by BCI is the only thing. Are we seeing the thin end of the wedge at the moment?
Well, we better make some good Bill of Rights for that, because that's that's what it's going to be built on. And I think my final thoughts here along the same lines of the Bill of Rights, there's some that we didn't even bring up. We touched on security a little bit, but the right to have those stored in a secure facility. I think the right to transparency, knowing what your data is being used for and how it's being used and what things they're doing to it and for what purposes. I think that's really important as well. I think we didn't even talk about sort of the we talked a little bit about non-discrimination about thoughts, but there should be no sort of the presence or absence of certain thoughts should not be, you shouldn't be discriminated against because of those. And I think that touches on a lot of things, and I think, and kind of, I don't know, you can compare that to sort of equality, other equality laws out there, non-discrimination laws, those types of things, to make sure everyone's treated fairly. I think there's also, just to kind of end this out, I brought up the opt-out thing, but then there's also the right to remediation. If any of these rights are kind of broken, then you should have the right to seek, some sort of remediation for those. I think this is a really interesting topic, and I can't believe we talked about it for what seems like not that long at all, and it's already been 40 minutes. So with that, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back to see what's going on with the human factors community right after this.
Are you tired of boring lectures and textbooks on human factors and UX? Well, grab your headphones and get ready for a wild ride with the Human Factors Minute podcast. Each minute is like a mini crash course packed with valuable insights and information on various organizations, conferences, usability methods, theories, models, certifications, tools, and much more. We'll take you on a journey through the fascinating world of human factors, from the ancient history to the latest trends and developments. Listen in as we explore the field and discover new ways to enhance the user experience. From the Think Aloud protocol to the critical incident technique, focus groups, iterative design, we'll make sure that you're the smartest person in the room. Tune in on the 10th, the 20th, and the last day of every month for a new and interesting tidbit related to human factors. Don't miss out on the Human Factors Minute podcast, your ultimate source for all things human factors.
Human Factors Cast brings you the best in human factors news, interviews, conference coverage, and overall fun conversations into each and every episode we produce. But we can't do it without you. The Human Factors Cast network is 100% listener supported. All the funds that go into running the show come from our listeners. Our patrons are our priority, and we want to ensure we're giving back to you for supporting us. Pledges start at just $1 per month and include rewards like access to our monthly Q&As with the hosts, personalized professional reviews, and access to the full library of Human Factors Minute, a weekly podcast where the hosts break down unique, obscure, and interesting human factors topics in just 1 minute. Patreon rewards are always evolving, so stop by patreon.com/humanfactorscast to see what support level may be right for you. Thank you, and remember, it depends.
Thank you to our patrons and all of you for selecting our topic this week. I forgot to mention before the break. And thanks to our friends over at Scientific American for our news story this week. We do post all the links to all the original articles in our weekly roundups in our blog. You can also join us on our Discord for more discussion on these stories and much more. We also want to give a huge thank you, as always, to our patrons. We especially want to thank our Human Factors Cast All Access and VIP patrons, Michelle Tripney. Patrons like you truly keep the show running. And you know what? As I'm on the topic of our website and our blog posts, I will go ahead and just plug the website, humanfactorscast.media. We post more than just our news roundups on there, that you can find every episode we've ever done, every interview that we've ever done. It's all indexed there for your convenience. So if you go in and search something like BCIs, you'll find every episode that we've ever done on BCIs. It's a great resource if you want to look into a certain topic area like AI, BCIs, cars, transportation. I don't know. Name something else, Barry. What else have we talked about on the show?
Human factors comes up occasionally.
Yes, do that. Go do a search on Human Factors on the Human Factors Cast website, humanfactorscast.media. All right, let's switch gears and get to the next part of the show, simply called...
It came from...
It came from, yes, this is the part of the show where we search all over the internet to bring you topics the community, the ominous community, as it's referred to, is talking about. If you find any of these answers useful, give us a like wherever you're watching or listening to help other people find this content. All right, this first one here is by user L. Tempierre 10 on the Human Factors subreddit. They write, Human Factors traveling jobs. Are there traveling jobs for Human Factors professionals, especially in aerospace and aviation? I want to avoid desk roles and would appreciate any insights or recommendations. Barry, do you know of any jobs, roles that travel for work?
Yeah, mine. I do a fair bit of... it's one of these things that, what is it you're trying to get out of it? It really depends. Are you talking about where you do cool things like go and sit in the cockpits and do analysis of, pilot workload, things like that? That's one thing. I've done a fair bit of that. I'll give you a hint after a while. It gets a bit samey. Or are you wanting to go to far-flung places and just talk to a broad range of different people? Then I think actually you've got... I know a lot of people who do like the conference circuit or, down the academic side of things, where people go to conferences and do a lot of foreign travel. Certainly a good colleague of mine at the moment has spent a lot of time around everywhere from Australia, New Zealand, Japan, just in the past few weeks. And they get around quite a lot. If you're going to do, if you want to have that sort of variation, rather than going to a large company, that you might want to go more thinking about freelance and become a consultant. That will get you out and about. But I guess it's more about looking at the sort of things where you're looking at engaging with people, come up with reasons about why you have to travel rather than just being sat at a desk. And that is, that's doing the sort of activities like workshop facilitation, like doing interviews, focus groups, that type of thing, where you might want to do more of that. But I think no matter what, you still end up sitting at a desk for a good chunk of time, because no matter where you go, what you do, you still got to write stuff up, you still got to do the analysis, you still got to do that type of thing. And I, at the risk of sounding slightly cynical, once you've done so much travel, it gets boring really quickly, I think. You certainly now with what I've learned, I think since COVID, you can get so much more done over these type, using your team, Zoom, whatever type of facilities. But getting that balance right between remote and face-to-face is absolutely key, because you can't do it all remotely. That was a really long way around saying it depends, doesn't it? What do you think,
Yep.
Nick?
It depends times 2. So I have 2 things and a secret. So the first thing is it depends on who you're talking to and their location and whether or not it's specialized. And then the second thing, or well, I guess that is the second thing, where they're at, right? Who it is and where they're at. If you have a user base that's everywhere, then unlikely that you'll need to travel. There's always going to be desk work, so I agree with you. There's always going to be desk work. You're always going to be doing something. It's not. I mean, unless you're like just in a data gathering role, but you need to process that information and you need to do something with it. So I can't imagine there's a scenario where someone would be doing all the fun stuff and then somebody else would be doing all the analysis on that fun stuff. I just don't see that. So so there's the who and there's the where. And there's scenarios where you have very specific users that are located in very specific types of places. So if you need to do like contextual inquiry, if you're doing like figuring out what they're doing and what they have on their desk and what's nearby as they reference this thing that you're building, or as you said, Barry, doing like a cockpit evaluation or something like that, workspace evaluation, that type of thing. I think there's a need to go out and do that stuff. Here's the secret. If you want to go to fairly exotic locations and travel the world, get into naval defense contracting.
Fair.
Okay, naval bases are usually somewhere in located by a body of water, and usually there's a lot to do by those bodies of water, and usually they're in fairly populous locations. Not always, but usually. There's got to be a community to support that base. And so if you need to go out to very specific users at these very specific bases that do these very specific things, you're going to need to travel. So there you go.
I would qualify that for those that know that last time I did that, I went to Barrow and Furnace for 4 years. If you know, you know. Anyway, moving on.
All right, let's get into this next one here. This next one by I Desire Pickles on the UX Research
I
subreddit.
love the names of these things. They're brilliant.
Oh,
Anyway, sorry.
they write crafting research questions. They write, as a researcher in a new role, the design manager expects me to create research questions and validate assumptions about creating an app. I am struggling with this and seeking advice on how to approach it. Barry.
Can I just use it depends again? So actually, I like this question. It's a decent question because it's so different from what does my portfolio look like?
Right.
And so fundamentally, I think it almost goes to the crux of how, I mean, you're basically setting your own requirement at this point. And getting the requirement right at the beginning of the project, at the beginning of the research element, is absolutely key to getting good research out the back end. Because if you understand what the question is you're trying to ask, then you'll understand whether you've answered it. And it sounds a simple thing to say, but actually, the face question, the obvious question, might not be the question that you're truly getting to the bottom of. So if you're trying to get to an app about and whatever you're doing, fundamentally, what does success look like? Is it the number of downloads? Is it the number of good customer feedback? Is it number of sales? Or, what is the actual driving The app doesn't exist just to exist. The app exists to do something. So therefore, how do you know if it's been successful? And there will be an overarching thing that what success looks like. And therefore, that is really the question that you're trying to drive to. But that will be a very high level question. I then tend to break it down to between 4, 5, 6 sub themes, because things normally fit into that type of thing, or maybe just the way I think about them. And you will be driven, because people love this. People will want to have some sort of numeric output, because they think that is useful for them. That's not necessarily useful for you. So this is where you actually not only define the question, but be quite stringent on why you're trying to get the type of answer that you're trying to get. So it might be a scalar, it might be something binary, it might be yes, no, I like it or dislike it. It might be a numeric, it might be something emotive, it might be something subjective, qualitative rather than quantitative. As long as you know why you're getting the type of answer and what you're going to do with the data you get in order to answer your research questions, then that's entirely within your remit. But everything has got to roll up to answering your research question, which is fundamentally achieving your requirement. Nick, what about you?
I think that's right. Look at the goals of what you're trying to accomplish and start to think backwards into what questions will answer those goals. Ultimately, you're looking at like hypothesis validation or invalidation at the base assumption, right? You might have multiple hypotheses. You're trying to figure out whether or not your assumption of how people will do a certain thing or feel about a certain thing is true or untrue, and what questions will get at that truth. And so that's kind of the process that you work backwards from that. I think just in general, like I think this is not like a researcher asking this. I feel like they've kind of been pushed into this role, or they're asking, somebody's asking them to do this, and they're asking researchers who know how to do this for advice. And so some practical things to look for here. Question banks are a great place to start. I know like Maze has a good one. There's tons of question banks and question batteries out there. Pick and choose from those, which might, and modify them for validating or invalidating those hypotheses that you have. Those might be a good place to start. Alternatively, if you don't know of any question banks, or you're just not hitting the right ones, I don't always advocate for this, but use something like an AI language model. You can say something along the lines of, "Here are the goals that I'm trying to do for this study," and it'll, what are some questions that I can ask users to figure out these things. It'll come up with some things. They're not all going to be great, but it might give you a starting point for thinking about what other questions you can ask, or what sort of categorization things that you can start to put together to measure those things. And if you need to, you can always ask it to follow up and say, how does this get to the goal? And that might actually give you some good thoughts into how to approach that. Okay, let's get into this last question here. All right. Researchers, how long do you keep your recordings? This is by Kim Yu on the user experience subreddit. They write, when do researchers usually delete their usability test recordings? Or in this case, we'll just say any data collection. I have recordings from 2 studies, and my laptop is running out of space. Should I get an external drive? Barry, what do you think?
So I think the test recordings here is relatively important, because it is something that you will be thinking, actually, I'll hold on to that, because that's your core, that's your raw material, isn't it? That's the actual words of the people that you've got. However, I'm going to suggest that really be careful with just how long you keep this stuff for. Because firstly, legalities. There are legal things around here. So in Europe, particularly GDPR, general data protection rights, and general data protection in of itself. You should only keep data and people for as long as you need to use that data for. You shouldn't just be keeping data just for the sake of it. So when you do your initial recording, you should be upfront with your subjects about saying, I'm using the data for it to do this, and I will be keeping the data for this long, and at the end of it, I will be doing this with it. And you should already know what your data plan is. That should be part of your briefing. And really, I would say for recordings in particular, as short as possible. Don't hang on to them. Once you've transcribed them, once you've done your notes, but make sure you've done your transcription and you've done your notes and analysis before you delete them, because you'll transcribe them and then you'll think, actually, I need to go back and look at, particularly if you're looking at something as well, it's not just about what they've said, it's about what they're doing, it's about their body language, all that sort of stuff. But it should be as short as possible, because people do have a right to be forgotten. People do have a right to ask for a data access request in the UK, freedom of information request, whatever you want to call it, depending on where you're at. So if you're holding more of this data, then actually the more of a headache you're creating for yourself. So I would say once you've transcribed, noted, and analyzed, basically once you've done what you need to do with the actual recordings, I would delete them, get rid of them as soon as possible, because from a logistical perspective, as the original poster has highlighted, it takes up space, and you have to think about where I'm going to store it. It has to be stored correctly. You have to store it securely. You can't just have it on random thumb drives, etc., etc. If nothing else, if you've got nothing else in place, once a project is finished, a general rule of thumb I always go to is you keep the data that you've got. So I would close a project down and I keep all data for 5 years. Because if you might end up, there might be legal issues coming up, there might be anything where you have to prove evidence, particularly if you've been involved in design sign-offs, anything like that. A general rule of thumb: keep things for 5 years. And once things, so do a general on project shutdown, do a cleanse, keep the basics, the raw, the basic information that you need for 5 years, and you will determine that on the type of project and the type of evidence you might need to produce. And then at the end of 5 years, get rid of everything but the essentials. That was a long way around saying, and that was an entire data management program. Nick, what do you think?
As to not incriminate me, I think. Look, here's the thing: it depends. The first and foremost, have a data plan. Specify in your informed consent how long you keep that data. There is, I guess, there's one sort of edge case where it's okay to keep data indefinitely. One, if it's your data, you can keep that. If you've accessed it from some other usability researcher, you can keep that, right? I think there's you should be entitled to your data, and we talked about data all this episode, so I'm just going to leave it at this. If the people that you are talking to are internal and you're storing that internal, then I don't think there necessarily needs to be a limitation on it. Although I'm talking from like a US perspective where companies come first, and we don't quite yet have the GDPR over here. So I'm a hoarder, so I personally am really bad about this. I don't.
But it is such a and actually I think this will make a fascinating episode in its own right, because we have such a drive to, you don't want to throw stuff away, because what happens if you get a nice little niche bit of data out of that you didn't get on the first pass, or if something does come back and you want to refer to it, why wouldn't you? But equally, I've been through so many projects now where you never touched again. You just don't, and you have the best of intentions, all that sort of stuff. But as soon as that project's over, you're out of there, and you're on to the next project.
But see, here's the thing: is like for me, what I want to do is like go through and do a massive search across all the transcripts and do a search for anytime somebody has mentioned this phrase and be like, oh, this thing that we're looking at now, let's go back and check that out. So define it.
I think that's a really good point, though. I think you're having your transcripts or your end analysis. I wouldn't throw that away, because it would be suitably anonymized and all that sort of stuff. The raw recordings, I would definitely throw. Anyway.
Okay. All right. Good question. All right. Time for one more thing. Barry, what's your one more thing?
I can't remember. I need to scroll down now, because I got so excited by having three it came from that we actually had to think about. So I guess for me this week, I got a level of honesty, or a level of reflection. We've been talking a lot, and I wrote an article on this recently for the Ergonomist that is just hitting the hitting the things now, hitting the doorsteps around the value of leadership. And I like to think I'm not a bad leader. I can do all this sort of stuff, but I was caught up short the other day when we were we're doing some work, and I do get into a habit, and I can be really guilty of it, of not delegating out work, because I think A, it's quicker to do it myself. B, I know it will be done to the standard that I want to be doing it if I do it myself, to the point that 24 hours in a day just isn't enough for doing it. But long time listeners to this show will know that both me and my wife work together in my company. And she did turn around the other day saying, "Oh, you're an amazing leader. You can motivate people, but you're a rubbish manager. You can't delegate. You talked about other people about delegating, but when it comes to it, you just can't let go, and you need to work on that." Now, having been running my own company now for over 11 years, it's nice of her to leave it to now to tell me this. But I just thought it was really interesting because she is absolutely right. I'm quite. It takes me a long time to be able to delegate stuff off, and then still keep the right level of support in place. So I just thought it was really interesting because we talked about burnout last week in the last episode. This episode, my one more thing was just I need more than 24 hours in a day. I just haven't got enough hours in the day to do all the things I want to do. And actually part of that is because I need to reflect more on my ability to delegate work off and let people get on with it. I feel better for saying that.
Good.
Yeah. What's your one more thing?
Well, if you need more than 24 hours in a day, I need more than 5 minutes for a one more thing. So I'm going to try to keep this short. If you want to hear the full story, go listen to the pre-show. But I managed to sprain both of my knees at the same time, and it's a hilarious story. I was squatting, and I came out of the squat and heard both my knees pop and woke up on the floor face up with my wife over me saying, "What happened?" I said, "I don't know. My legs still hurt." So that's one thing. The other thing that I want to say is just a huge shout out to one of our listeners, Noah, who sent a lovely voicemail after I had gone on last week about burnout. And he was giving me some advice and kind of how he's sharing some similar thoughts. I'm not going to play it on the episode. I don't think that's right. It was a very nice thing to receive. So thank you, Noah, for that. And just an update on the burnout thing. I'm freaking back, baby. We're back.
Oh no, I don't think I can take it.
All right, and with that, okay, go ahead and say, Barry.
No, I think that's very good to hear, and I'm pleased. Firstly, thank you to Noah for reaching out. It makes this feel like it makes it feel like the community it is, that people can realize that everybody needs a pat on the back occasionally.
That we're human too. We're not just personalities that come on and talk about human factors every week.
That's true. Yes.
Anyway, that is it for today, everyone. If you like this episode and enjoy some of the discussion about BCIs and the tech they use, and maybe even about mental privacy, I'll encourage you all to go listen to episode 279. BCIs pose a threat to mental privacy. Piracy too. Comment wherever you're listening what you think of the story this week. For more in-depth discussion, you can always join us on our Discord community. Visit our official website, sign up for our newsletter, stay up to date with all the latest Human Factors news. If you like what you hear, you want to support the show, there's a couple things you can do. One, you can stop what you're doing, leave us a 5-star review right now. That's free for you to do, and we really appreciate those. Tell your friends about us. That is also free for you to do and costs you nothing. And if you want to send money our way, we have a Patreon with a bunch of different benefits that you can look at on our website. So please go do that if you have the financial means to and want to support us that way. As always, links to all of our socials and our website are in the description of this episode. Mr. Barry Kirby, thank you for being on the show today. Where can our listeners go and find you if they want to talk about your invasive thoughts?
Well, you can just plug into my head at Twitter or X, depending on how rebellious you're feeling. I'm Baz_K on there and across other socials. Or if you want to listen to some interviews with esteemed people around the Human Factors community, find me on 1202 The Human Factors Podcast at 1202podcast.com. As
for me, I've been your host, Nick Roome. You can find me across social media at Nick_Roome. Thanks again for tuning in to Human Factors Cast. Remember, no show next week. Until next time, it depends. And scene, and the audio will come shortly. I clicked the button.
Hey. Oh, I'm boiling, melting. That was fun. That was good.
It's always those shows.
It is. It's the topics that you think that are not necessarily going to be, because we had no notes a small handful of notes for that compared to normally we'll have like a really good sort of breakdown of points and all that sort of stuff. We had 1, 2, 3. We had 4 notes there that were.
You know what, Barry? I've. Do I say this?
I don't know. Yeah, do it. Go on.
I don't know if I should say this. I'm just gonna hide behind the microphone.
Okay. but now we won't be able to hear what you say.
No, it's okay. I'll just shout from back here.
So cool.
Ow. Ah, my knees. Oh,
What you need?
jeez. Okay, I'll say it since I've hinted at it. Oh, God, this is going to sound so bad when I say it, Barry.
I'll just say it anyway.
I don't want you or anybody else to judge me for doing this.
I'm going to judge you anyway.
I've realized that when I put some good notes on the show notes, Barry sometimes steals them.
Fair comment. No, that's also why I try and I write. So my It Came Froms, I tend to write my It Came Froms before you write yours.
Right.
Because you then steal mine.
I never steal your It Came Froms.
Liar.
When did I steal your It Came Froms?
You're going to make me go back and now find it. But there's definitely been at least 2 times that I know that you stole points out of my It Came Froms.
Twice?
Twice. Well, it has been over a year since I've been doing this, so that's legitimate. But yeah, fair comment.
Oh! It came from. I thought you were talking about one more thing. Yeah, it came from. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then, I see our discussion points as just a free for all.
I do too. And to be clear, like I don't go and write a whole bunch of notes that are, like I wrote up just. Like, I don't know if you could tell. I had my own document for the AI Bill of Rights. Or not AI Bill of Rights. That was one of my references for the mental Bill of Rights or the BCI Bill of Rights, whatever you want to call it. I was adapting some points for that, and I had like them in a separate document just as a way to freely talk about those and throw those out there as augmentations to our discussion. And yeah, you're right. Like, it wasn't that I thought you would steal any of those. It just happened a little bit more naturally when I had my notes and you had your notes, and it was a conversation, which I think is actually flowed really nice. And I've been doing this for a couple shows now, and I think some of the shows that we've had recently are knocking it out of the park. So I think I'm going to keep doing this.
Works, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't pay any attention to my notes at all. I just say what comes into my head. So,
hey, me too, mostly. So I have to show you this. A few weeks ago, I told you that I had started like strapping everything together on my Steam Deck.
Yes.
Okay. I actually did the prep and I brought it in. So here's the Steam Deck, right? There's the base Steam Deck. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So now on the back, I have this dock that's actually, piggybacking off of it, and it's fine. It doesn't add too much bulk to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now below that, I have this magnet. Now this magnet, you can kind of see there, is just bolted on. It's not bolted on. It's just stuck on with some 3M tape, right? And it stays there just fine. And I have, all my cables kind of just hanging out here. It's a little annoying when I... Okay, but here's where it gets a little ridiculous, all right? You want to see where this gets ridiculous? Okay, so I mentioned I have a power bank. Okay, here's my power bank, and on both sides I have one of these little like
the plates,
magnetic strip. Okay, now this power bank's nice because if you click the button, you can actually see how much is left on it. Right now it says 67%. Right, so you can see that up there in that corner. Okay.
Yeah.
So, magnet meet power bank.
Whoa.
So now I can keep gaming, and if I want to, see what it actually sticks on there pretty well. If I wanted to see what the power is, I can kind of hold it like this, and it's a little bit more balanced. So I just wanted to show that because I don't think many people could envision what I was talking about last time when I was like, yeah, I put a power bank on the back of my Steam Deck, and it's actually really heavy. Like it doubles the weight.
Does it not make it top heavy as well? Does it not make it like sort of want to rotate out your hand?
Not really. So if I keep it low enough, the weight is like centered just enough to where it's resting on my middle fingers, which is just below. Like you can tell it's kind of like sitting on my middle fingers, and it wants to roll down, still. But yeah, it actually ends up being pretty comfortable weight wise for like gaming. I usually rest it on my lap or whatever, so that way it's not like a full thing. But anyway, yeah, it's funny because then also, let's say, and I still haven't figured out a way to do this like efficiently, but my phone has something, very similar in the back as those plates, so that way I can just do it wirelessly in my car. And so actually just shove my phone on the back of it if I wanted to.
Cool. Yeah.
But what I want to do is get like a, I don't know. I've been thinking about this, but like get essentially like a little bracket like that. Okay. You see this little bracket here? Shove it there and then have my phone magnetized on the bracket. So that way I can like put up guides and, whatever, and just have it hanging out right here above my Steam Deck and follow like walkthroughs or whatever I need to. Or I could be watching YouTube videos or something as I'm playing.
Ultimate multitasking tool.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, this is like, it's a little ridiculous, the like whole magnet thing, but I think it's actually kind of cool too, because it makes it expandable in ways that I didn't think about before. Like, I don't know. If I really wanted to, I could throw, I don't know. Here's what we'll do. Whoops. Ow. Ouch. That hurt. My phone just hit my toes.
Ow. At least it didn't hit your knee, because that would have been more painful.
All right. Here's what we could do. You ready for this one? I could put... I have... It's all metal. So I have this old thing that sits below your desk for a keyboard slider. Just put that right back there. I don't know. And now... Oh! Do you see what I see? Because I can now screw in my phone
and smash the screen.
Yes.
Yay!
Yep, there it is. There it is. I got it. You ready? Here it is. Check that out. Okay, the phone's sitting back there.
Okay, yeah.
So
I still think the thing of having the phone and the screen on at the same time, that's a mind blast in itself, because the whole multitasking piece.
I ultimately want to get it set up, and I think the best, the best way forward for that is to just get a flat plate for the back of it and put a magnet on the top of that flat plate, so I can literally flat plate it, and then my phone sits right above it, and then that way I can watch Human Factors Cast as I'm gaming.
Cool.
Or podcasts in general.
Yeah. So do you find you're using that gaming device a lot then? Are you still enjoying it? Because you were raving about it a few weeks ago.
Every day.
Still at wow.
Every day. It's nice.
Good stuff. So well recommended then, is what you're saying.
I think so. There's cheaper models that you can get than this one. So mine's the, what is it, 512 gigabytes or whatever, and I have 1,000 in my my little expandable SD card there. You can get like 64 gigabytes and expand the internal memory up to like 2 gigs or something, but it doesn't have like the anti-reflect screen, which still reflects, but probably not as much as like the other,
the shiny one would. Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I love it. It's nice. And like, what's really nice too is I have this portable dock, like literally backpacked onto it. So if I go traveling, I just throw a USB power into it and then plug that into the HDMI on the TV, and I can play it wherever I'm at with a PlayStation 4 controller.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And it works great.
So in many ways that's working a bit like a Switch then.
It does work very much like a Switch with respect to that. Like, and I also have, a dock here that I just literally plug the USB-C into the thing here, and it works like the same way. And it works with my setup here. So if I unplug my personal computer, I can plug this in and game, on my monitors here, which is nice too. So, but I have another PC up here, so I wouldn't want to do that. But yeah, I love it. It's great.
That's cool. So if we're not doing a show next week, what are you going to do with your extra time?
Oh, that's interesting. I
sleep. Oh, it's daytime for you, isn't it? So I guess not.
Yeah, no, I have. I actually have user meets next Thursday, so I will be analyzing data at this time next week.
Fucking wrong.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think what I'll be doing. I don't know. I go to the pub. In the wait. In fact, no. If I've done that, then I'll be just getting kicked out of the pub at this point.
Barry, that just unlocked something.
Oh.
No, it's a good thing, and I like. Hang on. I wonder. I'm going to type this in chat, and I want you to read this. Hold on. What if we?
Yeah, possible. Yeah, with beers.
Or it could be an opportunity to do other things too, like or I don't know. It just thinking about like a couple things. It's weird because I'm like referencing all this stuff in text. I just don't want to expose it,
Yeah. No, I think there's a the idea is that if we look at how it makes better use of the time.
Exactly. Because it's not so much the time commitment; it's the everything else.
Yeah, the headspace
stuff.
So I've got another interesting problem that I'm going to help with. So in our new offices, have I mentioned we've got some new offices? I think I have once or twice. We've just got
a new car too.
No, that it's a year old now. Yes,
I can't believe that.
It's crazy, isn't it? So I know that because we just had to renew the insurance on it, and I nearly cried. So we've got a new sign. It's a small sign. It's about, I guess, a 14 by 12 inch sign, something like so relatively small. To go outside above the door of the office, and I assumed. So we got the sign off my usual supplier. Brilliant service, and I asked him for it the other 3 days ago or something, and it arrived today. The guy is amazing at turning stuff around quickly. But when he came, I assumed it would have mounting holes, and it doesn't. So I was thinking, hey, I mean, it's no effort to drill some holes in. That's easy.
Oh boy,
what have you done?
What, me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just flipping my mic over to make it tighter.
Yeah. So drilling holes in the sign, relatively easy. You can crack on do it. But actually, could I trust modern technologies and actually glue it up outside instead? So it's a metal sign, probably aluminium sign. Going onto a wooden plinth, I guess, type of thing. Like I say, it's relatively lightweight, so it's not. So it's the sort of thing that probably with a little glue or something like that, some sort of epoxy type affair. Would probably work on, but I've never done it before, so I think it might prove an interesting experiment, because it should do, because things like Gorilla Glue or the brands are available. That's what they said. That's what it prides itself on, being able to bond like metal with wood and things like that in a waterproof way. So if anybody on on the socials or who's listening to this has got any thoughts or ideas, then chuck them into chat or into the comments and let me know, because I think it would be hugely useful. Ideally, it's something I'd like to do tomorrow, but I've got another sort of problem with that. So the sign is outside.
Mm-hmm.
There's an old sign to come down, and we are right opposite the pub. So there's a local pub, and it is literally just the other side of the street, where people frequent it pretty much from 8 o'clock in the morning all the way through to 11 o'clock at night. So I would have to be on a stepladder, taking the old sign down, which is not going to be an easy task because the screws are rusted and it's going to need a bunch of prep and stuff like that. The chances of me falling over, or just people giving me sarky comments as I'm doing said job, is probably quite high. Therefore, I need to think about how I'm going to achieve this without anybody mocking me being up a ladder and potentially falling off and all that sort of stuff. So this whole thing around a new sign is going to be quite a challenge. I'm looking forward to it. What could possibly go wrong?
Nothing.
We shall see.
I believe you have this.
Well, there'll be. I presume I'm probably going to put it on over the weekend, so there will be presumably photos at some point.
I love that.
I've just thought, I don't have. If I glue this up, I could glue metal to metal, and not actually take the previous sign down at all, and just glue this one in front of it.
Is the previous one, is that smaller, or is it?
It's the same size. It's pretty much exactly. I think it'll be ever so slightly smaller. But I wonder whether I've got a picture of so I can. I think
that could work. That could work.
There's my photos.
I love how this is like our headspace to figure things out, because I'm also like churning on something too in my head that we just talked about, and I'm like, oh, would that work? And you're like, oh, would that work? In other ways. And we're both just sitting over here going, ooh, would that work?
Yeah, see, it's there, but I don't. Can you see that? Oh, yes, you can see that well enough. Right, let's chuck a share up.
I'm gonna need to do stuff then. Okay.
We
take away our name tags.
That one.
And in fact, I'll just leave this little number up here. Okay, here we go. All right.
So, if you see that, you can see my mouse on the screen. See that little sign there? So the roller door here in the middle, that is the entrance to our new offices, because we've got these 2 floors above. Where you've got the Oxfam shop and this shop here, we've got the 2 floors above it. So quite large. So, but you access it by this little roller door here.
Right.
And then this little sign above here is just what the previous people had. So what I've got is a sign that is exactly the same size as that. That should use the wooden plinth behind it. And so my sign will just go directly over that. And I was assuming that I would need to take this one down in order to put mine on it. But actually, I don't necessarily need to have to do that. I could potentially just glue straight onto that and it be a thing.
You could.
That might be an easier way of doing things. I shall have to think about that, because that means this sign will need preparation. I don't believe the company that was there, or the organisation that was there before us actually, well, that sign's been up there for ages and nobody's claimed it back. So, yeah. We shall see. Anyway, right, I'll stop sharing.
Okay.
That.
All right.
But yeah, so that's the challenge for the weekend.
The challenge for the weekend. Well, I like that. I just as you were talking, I just realized that I have things that I can put my phone into.
Brilliant.
And now, like, how do I get this ball joint through one of these holes? Granted, it won't be a magnetic clip like I wanted, but I could potentially just attach, the ball joint there to that, and then all I would need to do is just slap it on there, and it's done. I do have magnetic things elsewhere, though. Magnets, man, they're cool.
Yeah, I always do worry about them though, about whether you're going to, because I know electronics are now better developed in recognizing that magnets are now a useful thing to use. But I still have the whole don't put them near screens, don't put them near your phone, even though we use them near the phones and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
I'm just old school.
So. This actually came from one of these.
Right. Okay.
All right. Now, if I ever needed a little bit more of a holder for this thing, I could always just, put that there.
I'm not going to suggest you might be over-engineering things, but
This is exactly what I was saying the other week, is that I'm over-engineering this stuff, and also, this is too heavy to support its weight. Look, it'll fall.
Yeah. No, and it'll give you neck strain.
Yep.
But,
don't need that right now. Oh, but this thing does have a kickstand built in too. Look at that.
Oh, cool.
The dock.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Yep.
So,
Oh,
I don't
cool.
know. Very cool stuff. I'll take that off.
Well, I have the joy tomorrow morning of, because I had a full council meeting today at the CIHF, which was fun, and we got through that in a morning, which normally it takes us, if we do a physical meetup, we tend to fill the day. But it's amazing how online we can actually get through material quicker. But tomorrow I get to have the morning of going to what's called FEES, which is the European Federation of European Ergonomic Societies, which is going to be interesting. It's my first meeting with them, and so it'll be interesting to see what comes from that. And I've suggested that I might be, or I could be a little bit blunt when I'm there, but we shall see. Because I struggle to a certain extent with these higher level societies, fees, IEA, and things like that. About are we replicating what we're doing, or are we should they be there to be more strategic? And so that's something I'm exploring at the moment.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's how we rock and roll. Yeah.
I love rocking and rolling. I'm fired up, man. I'm excited.
I'm pleased you are. I'm ready for bed. I'm so tired. I think it's so hot as well. It was really funny too. I went to pick my daughter up from the bus because she started school, started sixth form this week, or college this week, and so I picked her up from the bus and she jumped in the car. It's been really, really hot, and so car's nice and cool. She gets out of the car. She wears glasses. The first thing that happens is glasses. Yeah, and she couldn't see a thing. It made me laugh in a way that shouldn't have been that funny.
Oh, yeah. I felt the same way when my knees buckled. Yeah, let me put it that way.
But that is funny, to be fair.
That's hilarious.
It's not. I'm sure everybody sympathizes with you.
I'm sure. I'm going to get a nice voicemail from Noah saying, I'm really sorry about your knees. Just keep them elevated. He was very nice. He was very nice in his he actually left like a voice message.
Cool.
And I gotta go back and like see here.
Because I did something silly the other night as well, in terms of I was trying to cut an ingrown toenail on my foot, and happened to a small lapse of concentration meant that I cut into the end of my big toe. Turns out there's a lot of blood in your big toe, because of the type of thing that it is, and it was properly pouring blood all over the bathroom floor. And I was like, this was meant to be a 2-minute job. I now can't get upstairs to get into my bedroom because I can't find any plasters. I can't go upstairs without leaving a trail of blood everywhere. And so I'm lying on the bathroom floor with like sort of tissue over it with putting compression on it to stop the bleeding. And I basically sat down there, and my wife wondering where I've got to, because obviously not coming to bed because I'm sat on the bed, the bathroom floor, waiting for bleeding out, and waiting for my toe to stop. So yeah, so we all do amusing things like that.
This okay. I just gotta say, this message, 2 minutes and 21 seconds long.
That's a considered message. That's not a hope you're all right message. So
yeah,
well,
that's what I'm saying.
Good man.
Yeah. Thanks, Noah. And thank you all for tuning in and watching us live. Really appreciate you all here.
Indeed.
We'll be off next week. Be
Yeah.
back 2 weeks from now.
2 weeks time, hopefully.
Talk about something. Be on the lookout for our poll that you can all vote in. Become a patron. You'll be alerted when those polls go out for just $1 a month or more if you want to do that. All right. We'll take off, and we'll see y'all next time. Thank you for joining us, and take care of yourselves and your loved ones.
See you later.
Bye.
Are you tired of boring lectures and textbooks on human factors and UX? Well, grab your headphones and get ready for a wild ride with the Human Factors Minute podcast. Each minute is like a mini crash course packed with valuable insights and information on various organizations, conferences, usability methods, theories, models, certifications, tools, and much more. We'll take you on a journey through the fascinating world of human factors, from the ancient history to the latest trends and developments. Listen in as we explore the field and discover new ways to enhance the user experience. From the Think Aloud protocol to the critical incident technique, focus groups, iterative design, we'll make sure that you're the smartest person in the room. Tune in on the 10th, the 20th, and the last day of every month for a new and interesting tidbit related to human factors. Don't miss out on the Human Factors Minute podcast, your ultimate source for all things human factors.
Human Factors Cast brings you the best in human factors news, interviews, conference coverage, and overall fun conversations into each and every episode we produce. But we can't do it without you. The Human Factors Cast network is 100% listener supported. All the funds that go into running the show come from our listeners. Our patrons are our priority, and we want to ensure we're giving back to you for supporting us. Pledges start at just $1 per month and include rewards like access to our monthly Q&As with the hosts, personalized professional reviews, and access to the full library of Human Factors Minute, a weekly podcast where the hosts break down unique, obscure, and interesting human factors topics in just 1 minute. Patreon rewards are always evolving, so stop by patreon.com/humanfactorscast to see what support level may be right for you. Thank you, and remember,